Welcome to Polar Opposites. My name is Justin Conder, and listen up. Today, we are going to pull out the crystal ball. We are going to look at the political future of our country. And by already looking at it, I can tell you there are no ands, ifs, or buts about it. There is a very specific direction we are heading in as a country. This is because of a growing movement that is picking up steam and attracting so many people to it. A movement that is adding to its numbers daily. What is this organization? What are they doing? And what am I so sure that is absolutely going to happen to our country? We're going to answer all that today. But before we get into that, last time we talked about the Electoral College and how it is hurting our country and how we need to implement different changes. If you haven't seen that episode already, I would encourage you to go back and to watch it, because we're going to revive that conversation in the very near future. And we're going to be discussing some of the things that are going to need to happen in order for us to move away from the Electoral College. Spoiler alert, it has to do with us changing the Constitution. But to get back on track here, the movement that is picking up steam, the movement that is going to change our country, what is it? Why am I so certain about it? The movement are supporters of ranked choice voting. The people who are advocating for this are some of the loudest, proudest, and they are so willing to spread the good word, and that is why it is picking up steam. To understand what ranked choice voting is, first, I want to explain why it's needed. If you're a third-party candidate in the United States, realistically, how many seats can you expect to win? If we look at the United States Senate, right now they're an anomaly. We have 2 U.S. senators who do not belong to either the Republican or Democratic Party. That is Angus King of Maine and Bernie Sanders of Vermont. They're the only 2 in the entire Senate. What happens if we look at the House of Representatives? Absolutely no one who is any other party other than Republicans and Democrats. What about governors? There are no governors who are not either Republican or Democrat. Do you see a theme here? Republicans and Democrats are acting as a duopoly in our political system. Now, duopoly is similar to a monopoly, which is where one company is to control an entire industry. If you had one company, that's not good for consumers. They can price gouge, they can completely rip off everybody, and if they are a terrible company, nobody has anywhere else to turn. One of the next worst things to that is a duopoly, where you only have 2 options. In the case of our government, we have 2 options, Republicans or Democrats. In a capitalist society, there's a reason why we encourage many different companies to get involved in the market. That's because it is good for consumers. People like you and I, we're consumers of the government. And a lack of options, a lack of places that we can turn to get representation in our government is not good for us. Who is it good for? It's good for the companies, which in this case are the political parties, the Republicans and Democrats. Those are the 2 organizations that are benefiting from this system that we are currently in. All of our elections are basically winner takes all at this point in time. Winner takes all is not a good system because let's say that you have Chris Hemsworth, Chris Pratt, and Chris Evans running for a political office, okay? I want to bring back the Chris's from episode 1. We're going to do the Marvel thing one more time. If you had Chris Hemsworth win 40% of the vote, Chris Evans win 30%, and Chris Pratt win 30%, Chris Evans would win the election with only 40% of the vote. That means the majority of people didn't get the person that they wanted elected into office. This is where ranked choice voting comes into play. Instead of being a winner takes all, instead of having just one vote for whichever candidate you want to elect, you get to take your ballot and you get to rank the candidates one by one. If you put Chris Hemsworth as your first choice, they would be marked down on your ballot as choice number 1. If you mark down Chris Pratt as your second choice, they would be choice number 2. And if you hate Chris Evans' guts, you can put him as number 3 or even keep him off completely. It doesn't matter at that point. Here's the thing about ranked choice voting. If you do not win 50% of the vote, then you have to look at those second choice votes. The candidate with the lowest number of votes would be disqualified from the election. Once you've counted up that candidate who's been disqualified, once you've counted up the people who voted for them, their second vote, you award those second votes to each of those candidates, and they become as if it was just their first vote. Now, if somebody gets 50% after that, they become the winner. If not, the system continues. You keep going until you have a winner. Somebody has to get over that 50% margin in order to win. Ranked choice voting has a lot of good things going for it. For starters, if you've got political candidates, they end up playing a lot nicer with each other under a system of ranked choice voting. Here's why. If you're up there bad-mouthing other candidates and trying to get under their skin, like many of the politicians do in debates right now, then likely you're going to end up losing a lot of support from other people who may choose you as their second choice. If you play nicely, though, people may see you as a safe second choice, and it would make it a lot more likely for you to gain support and popularity in the second round. That would be vastly different than the way we're currently doing things right now, where almost every debate that you turn on, no matter what, somebody's screaming at somebody else, calling them names, and trying to get people to absolutely hate them. That's what a winner-takes-all system does for you. Ranked choice does the opposite. Another pro is that when you are voting, you are less likely to waste your vote. A lot of people who want to support third-party candidates, they actually can support those third-party candidates. They can be their first vote. And guess what? If that third-party candidate gets disqualified, you have the option to write in another candidate as your second choice. That would make it so that you are actually getting some representation still. It wouldn't be your number 1 guy, but maybe your number 2 or number 3 option ends up winning the election, which is a lot better for you than your least favorite candidate winning the election. It also diversifies the political playing field. We already kind of touched on this when we discussed how Republicans and Democrats are a duopoly. If you think about it, a lot of these third-party candidates are going to start getting a lot more traction when people realize that they're not going to waste their vote by voting for them. This is going to put a lot of those third parties on the map. It may not happen right away, but over time, you will start to see more and more third-party options getting elected. It's also because people don't have this fear of the spoiler effect. Basically, the spoiler effect, let's say you have 2 candidates running for political office, and these guys are very similar. And then you have a third person who is running for office who's completely different than those people. Because these 2 are running, they may end up splitting the support. Some people who are on that side of the spectrum may vote for one of them. Some of them may vote for the other. That increases the likelihood that the candidate over here ends up getting elected. That is something that occurs in a winner-takes-all system. You have that spoiler effect, but not with ranked choice voting. Other good things about ranked choice voting, it gives you more options on what to do with your ballot. You may be wondering, well, what if I don't want to rank every single person who's running for a political office? Guess what? you don't have to rank every single person. You only have to rank the people that you like. Now, the less you fill out your ballot, the more likely you are to have what is called an exhausted vote, or somebody whose ballot has completely run out of options. But having a system where you have an exhausted vote is still far superior from having a system where you have a winner takes all. Ranked choice voting is a good system to implement when we're trying to figure out who the best candidate is to fill a very specific seat. If you have one position that's up for grabs, it basically allows the general public to say, this is the person we prefer the most. Even if not everybody would have voted for them as their first choice, the person who gets elected, in theory, is going to be the most supported throughout the community. Ranked choice voting works on these single office seats, and like you've heard me say in previous episodes, proportional representation is still a very good idea when it comes to electing members of the House of Representatives. That's because there's many seats in the House of Representatives that need to be filled. If you want to learn more about proportional representation, go check out episode 1 of this podcast. It explains it very well. So basically the gist of it is, when you have lots of seats, proportional representation is best. When you have only one single seat, ranked choice voting is best. Now, it's going to be pretty tough to implement ranked choice voting in our country, despite how popular it is starting to get. The reason for that is because Republicans and Democrats have a very tight grip on how things are controlled right now. When you have people in power, they are not likely to want to give up that power. And that is just human nature. It is going to be tough for us to make our way over to that system of ranked choice voting. But there are some ways and some steps that we can take to start going in that direction. First of all, implementing runoff elections would be a good start. A runoff election basically says that you need to have your winner win by at least a margin of 50% or more. So, in a runoff system, if you don't get 50% of the vote, then you end up going to a runoff with the two most popular candidates. After that, you only have two candidates, so whoever wins between those two and gets over that 50% threshold wins the election. If you end up having a tied election, you flip a coin. I guess that's how you do it in those very, very rare circumstances. Some of you may be wondering, well, if we have implemented a runoff system, doesn't that basically do the same thing as ranked choice voting, where somebody has to win by a margin of 50% and then they win? Isn't it the same thing? The answer is no. Because when you have a runoff election, you still run into the issue of a duopoly Republican-Democrat system. Ranked choice voting diversifies the political landscapes and gives us more options to consider. We need more options, and we need a better system of elections in our country because things are not fair right now. Speaking of things that are not fair, our very next episode, we're going to be discussing gerrymandering, what that is, and why it is ruining our elections even more than they've already been ruined. Now, as for the reason why I am 100% sure that we will eventually get ranked choice voting in our country, it's come out that over 60% of the country already approve of ranked choice voting. These people are young, engaged, and they are getting more politically savvy. One of the biggest criticisms of ranked choice voting is that people don't understand it and it's going to frustrate voters. Young people are learning about this already. The more time goes on, the better we are going to get at educating people about the political process, and specifically how to vote in a ranked choice voting system. The up-and-coming ideas are rolling in fast and furious. The old traditional ways of winner takes all, they are a dying breed. We are definitely going to get ranked choice voting, which means that there's only one more thing to consider. That is you. If you have ideas that you need to share, if you have thoughts that need to be heard, if you support a third party and want it to get noticed, ranked choice voting is a system for you. If you agree, I would like to formally welcome you to the ranks. Thank you for joining me today here on Polar Opposites. It's been a privilege to have you on. Share these ideas with families and friends. By liking, subscribing, and following this channel, you'll get more great content just like this. And like always, when you learn better, do better. We'll see you next time.